Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Paul Brown Show. This evening, my guest will be Mr. Curtis Osborne. He's a candidate for the North Carolina 12th District Congressional seat. How you doing there, sir?
Great. How are you doing, Mr. Brown?
Outstanding. Tell the audience a little bit about Curtis Osborne.
Well, I was born in 1969 down in Monroe, North Carolina. Raised by my mom. She raised me and my sister. I grew up in public housing. I was poor, but the thing that I did have was access to a quality public education, starting in Head Start. Made my way through school, worked hard, studied. Of course, I participated in athletics. Finished high school, and I went off to Virginia Military Institute, often referred to as VMI. I stayed there. After the first year, I transferred to North Carolina State University, continuing to focus in civil engineering. During the time that I was at NC State, I enlisted in the U.S. Army Reserves. I served 4 years active, 4 years inactive. I graduated from North Carolina State University in '92, worked as an engineer for a couple of years, and then I decided to change careers. I went on to law school. I studied over at North Carolina Central University School of Law, finished law school in '98, came back to my hometown of Monroe, a little small town right outside of Charlotte, and I hung a shingle. I started my own little law firm, and I practiced law for a couple of years, and I went back to school and got an advanced law degree after 2 years, and then I continued practicing in Washington, D.C., doing a lot of employment discrimination, representing women and minorities who were discriminated against on the job, also handling pay cases where women weren't being paid the same as men for doing the same work.
You're running for the North Carolina 12th District Congressional seat. What made you want to run for that seat or an office?
Well, as you know, Mr. Brown, this is my first time as a candidate for any kind of office, public office. I look at life and I see that, I look at where I am now and statistically where I should be. And what I mean by that is, given that I grew up in the projects and public housing, statistically I should be either dead or locked up or have some other fate other than sitting here before you running for office as an attorney who's practiced law for 15 years. And the reason that is because I had access to a quality public education. Then I had the opportunity through the struggles of other people, sacrifices of other people to go get an education. And I feel like I have to give back. 11 months ago, the president nominated Mel Watt, who's done an excellent job for the 12th Congressional District, serving 21 years, to head up the Federal Housing Finance Agency. And I felt confident that Mr. Watt would be confirmed. So when he was nominated, I looked at it and I said, well, this would be an opportunity for me to go out and serve the people, to give back, from what I've received. And I decided to jump in. I decided I'd do a good job. I figured my background has prepared me for it. 15 years practicing law in state and federal courts, serving the people, fighting in the trenches, representing people. And I saw it also as a way to continue, in a sense, doing what I've been doing for the past 15 years, and that is representing people. But instead of representing people in the courts, it would provide me an opportunity to represent people in Washington, D.C., and also here locally, but represent many, many more people. This district is made up of about 700,000 people.
Okay. Education. I know it's one of the core issues of your campaign. Why do you feel that is so vital for our community?
Well, if you get an education, it lays the foundation for the rest of your life. And you've got to take advantage of education. There's so many people who've made sacrifices in the past so that people can get a good education. Those who can afford private school for their kids, I think is great, and they should send their kids to private school. But I think it's important that we ensure that all kids have an opportunity to get a quality public education, because not all people can afford private school. Not all people can get into charter schools. And I look back at my past and I see that it was a quality public education that laid the foundation for where I am now. And I think it's really important that we keep the doors open to quality public education for kids out there who have access, who have abilities rather, to go off and do well and then come back and serve the community in one way or another.
How do you rate our education system right now, and what do you feel we need to do to improve it?
Well, I think we have a pretty good educational system in North Carolina, but there's always room for improvement. We always say, you hear the saying that the kids are our future, the children are our future, and I believe that, because it is the young people out here who will eventually become the older people who are running things. And we have to look at the people who have the responsibility of educating our kids, and those are the teachers. So I'd say one of the first things we've got to do is make sure we take care of the teachers. We've got to take care of those persons who have the responsibility of taking care of the children, of educating and leading the children. So I want to make sure that teachers get adequate pay. They need to get reasonable compensation for the work that they do. A lot of times teachers are under appreciated. School teachers do quite a bit. They're not just teachers. A lot of times they're counselors, they're psychologists, they're extended family members. They do quite a bit, so we've got to make sure we take care of the teachers. We've got to make sure we keep access to public education open. We've got to make sure, if we can, to build the infrastructure to keep it from crumbling. We've got to make sure, if it's possible, to reduce the student to teacher ratio so that we have fewer students in the classrooms. I think that allows students to learn a whole lot better.
I know we have a lot of students who want to learn, come to school that wants to learn. How about those students that are disruptive, the ones that really not there for the right reason? How should we solve that problem? Because sometimes it just takes one child to. Yeah,
well, as I understand it, you're going to have kids out there who are going to be somewhat disruptive, but you got to have alternatives for them.
Correct.
You got alternative education programs, you got counseling programs, because sometimes students, they're disruptive not because they're just bad people, but because they might have things going on in their lives, things going on at home. A lot of times that disruptive behavior is a sign of something else. Many times that can be solved. There are a lot of people out in the world who eventually, given a lot back to society, who weren't the most well-behaved students. And I think a lot of those people can tell you that their behavior was based on a lot of things that were going on outside the school. For instance, you got kids who might not be getting the proper nourishment. They might be going to school tired. And if they're tired and fidgety, easily agitated, it might come across as just a disruptive student. When in actuality, if you look below the surface, you'll see that it's a kid who's at home struggling to just survive, who's cold at night because they don't have the heat turned on because they can't afford it, or it's been turned off, or who simply doesn't have enough food to fill his belly or her belly before coming to school.
So there are warning signs, and we shouldn't think that child is disruptive just for any reason. There is probably a vital reason why that child's behaving the way he is.
I think so. In most situations, there's a reason behind it. I don't think you have a lot of people who are just inherently evil. Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of times, kids want to do the right thing. I think most kids want to get education. They want to prepare themselves for the future. But you have situations where kids are from homes where they just aren't getting enough nutrition. They just aren't being able to stay warm at night because mom and dad or mom can't pay the heating bill. Then a lot of times it will factor over into the school life. What goes on outside of school, those 7 hours or so in school is much, much more important than what actually goes on in school with respect to a student being prepared and being able to take on the rigors of an academic day.
I know another issue that we have is the minimum wages. What's your views on that issue?
Well, the president recently raised the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour for federal contractors or anybody working with a federal contract. I believe we need to raise minimum wage. I think here in North Carolina, we need to raise it to at least $10.10 an hour. I would say we could raise it to upwards of $15 an hour, but I think it needs to be raised to at least $10.10 an hour because, based on what the minimum wage is right now, it's not enough for people to survive. I think that if people take on the responsibility of working every day, working hard, correct, then they should be able to make enough money to take care of their family. They should be able to make a living wage. Now, $10.10 an hour enough for somebody to live off of? Well, it's gonna depend upon that person's circumstances. But I think at the very minimum, we need to raise the minimum wage to $10.10. That's a good starting place.
And you see a lot of parents working more than one job. How does that cause a issue within that family structure?
You know, when family members, or more specifically parents, aren't home when kids get home from school because they're working, and then the parents have to work a second job, and they actually don't get home in the early evening or late afternoon, as a lot of other parents do, then those kids are home by themselves. I think it leaves room for kids to go out and get into things they wouldn't ordinarily get into or otherwise get into if the parents were home. They don't get the attention. The kids don't get the attention that they would ordinarily get if the parents were there. The leadership that's provided when parents are home is lacking when parents are working two jobs. Statistically, it's shown that kids who have parents who don't work multiple jobs generally do better in school. And do better sometimes in life because they have that leadership there. They have the guidance of a parent. And I think we all agree that if you've got a leader or if you've got somebody giving you guidance, the more time they can spend with you actually providing the guidance for the leaders, the better off you'll be.
Another issue, very important issue that we have is our veterans. What do you feel? Do we take care of the veterans like we should?
Well, not exactly. I think we can do a better job. Now, let me preface this by saying that, as I pointed out earlier, I served 4 years active in the Army Reserves and 4 years inactive. So, I really care about veterans. And I do know right now there's a backlog with regard to claims, disability claims. And that backlog exists, because, for the most part, because we have a lot of vets coming into the system, and the system just isn't prepared, it was not designed or not currently designed to handle the number of veterans who are in the system. And the question becomes, why are there so many veterans coming back filing disability claims? Well, we had lots of troops in Iraq, and we brought those troops home. And many of the troops in Afghanistan are coming home. There's a drawdown. Actually, most of them have come home. So you've got, a lot of veterans coming home from two major wars almost simultaneously. And it just overloads the system with regard to the VA being able to properly handle the number of claims that are coming in. We've got to do a better job. We've got to find funding and so that we can better situate the system to handle all the claims that are being filed. We've got to hire more people, and we've got to make the system more efficient. We've got to cut red tape where we can and just make it a whole lot more efficient. We've got to take care of our veterans. I think that anytime you have people who go out and they serve the country,
correct,
so that the rest of us can sleep well at night and not have to worry about tanks rolling over the border or worry about someone bombing our homeland, then I think we owe a certain debt to those people. And if people go off and they suffer injuries, whether those be psychological injuries or physical injuries, we need to do whatever we can to make sure those veterans are taken care of.
We have a lot of people in our community that have never been in the military. I'm a veteran myself.
All right.
In your opinion, what do you feel they should know about being a veteran and coming from actual military to civilian life that they probably want to understand?
Well, the military is a different world, as you know.
Correct.
There's a whole different set of rules and regulations, and quite frankly, different laws. The law in the military is different than the law in the civilian world. There are a lot of people who are in the military who are used to doing certain things that they can't do in civilian life. You can't walk around with an M16
Correct.
on the streets, even